After what feels like years of delays, John Krasinski's A Quiet Place 2 kicks off the summer season in an explosive fashion. But did it live up to the stellar reputation of the previous installment? Excellent question. For anyone who has not seen the original A Quiet Place, this review will absolutely spoil some of that for you. So please keep that in mind. It's been about 3 years since the release of the original A Quiet Place took the horror world by storm. Refreshing and unique, it was one of the best horror movies I'd seen in years, and given the critical and financial success of the film, I'd say most viewers and critics alike agreed. When it comes to horror movie tropes, it did a ton of things right. Effective jump scares that didn't feel cheap, tension like nobody's business, characters you actually gave a damn about. It just worked. So there was a lot for the sequel to live up to when it was first announced. Now it's here. Pandemic be damned. The new film starts with a look into just how all of this got started. And it's just as chaotic and explodey as we could have imagined. And we get to see dear old Lee Abbott alive and well for the last time. This first bit of the film is a teaser we were given back in 2020. And while it's not exactly reflective of the rest of the movie, it gives us some much needed insight and sets the tone for the rest of A Quiet Place 2. When we catch up with the Abbotts again in present day, they've just lost their patriarch and are very heavy into their grief, which is interesting to see because they also now have a new member of the family who was introduced to us in one of the most dramatic births I have ever seen put to film, outside of that craziness in Prometheus. Seriously, Emily Blunt's character is a total G in that film, and it has not changed in this one. As most sequels do, this film has decidedly gone bigger in a few different ways. The stakes have been raised, especially since there is now an infant in their ranks. We see way more aliens than we saw in the first film, and the family is also way less isolated, and the cast itself has ballooned. In the first film, it was literally only them, save for that one crazy dude who snitched on them for whatever reason. The biggest addition to the cast is Cillian Murphy's character Emmett, who was a previous acquaintance of the family and poignantly a friend to John Krasinski's character Lee. I for one think Cillian Murphy is one of the most talented and underrated actors of our time, and he filled in as a surrogate for the deceased father Lee without being too obvious about it. And sadly, he too was dealing with loss as well as a complete distrust of what humanity has become. Another departure from the previous film is that we see the family go off on their own separate adventures. Daughter Reagan, played with so much grace and heart by Millicent Simmonds, makes up the meat of the movie in her journey with Emmett. In her father's absence, she's now become the heroine of the story, which she actually was being groomed for in the first film. And it feels appropriate. Through these two, the story does eventually go in the exact way most stories that deal with a catastrophic event and the breakdown of society goes when the pair runs into a rather feral-looking bunch, whom I assume eat people. But this is not The Walking Dead light. It is absolutely not the focus of the film. This movie and everyone involved knocked it out of the park. A Quiet Place 2 is not only one of the best horror sequels I've seen, it's one of the best sequels, period. Just like with the first one, I was stressed as hell watching it. It was a tense, invigorating ride that I don't think would have had the same impact being watched at home. It's definitely one of those movies that just feels so much better in theaters. I will say that for me, the horror elements were a little lighter this time around, and in this place, survivalism was ramped up. They aren't in the comfort of the home they know so well. They're out on the road, at times without one another, facing even more unknown circumstances than before. I got the feeling that it wasn't just about them surviving, it was about humanity surviving as a whole. I just love the Reagan character and what they've done with her. She was amazing. Everyone was great in the film, but she was definitely the standout. And it feels as though she was always meant to be just that. And it isn't just about her lack of hearing, which is interesting in itself for a few different reasons. For one, It puts her at an obvious disadvantage because she cannot detect the one thing these creatures are drawn to. But at the same time, it gave her family a major boost in communication by being the complete opposite of what beckons the creatures. I don't know if it was meant to draw similarities between Reagan and the creatures, but I did notice that hearing is a strength and weakness for both of them. The bottom line is, if you loved the first A Quiet Place, you have to see this one. There's plenty for fans of horror and sci-fi, and even just plain old-fashioned survivalist films. It was not subtle in the fact that a third installment is very likely, and you will hear no complaints about that from me. Some things I'd actually like to see in the next film would be a little insight into these aliens. Like, where the hell did they come from? Are they just here to wreck stuff? I think that these are questions that a lot of fans have had, and there's a lot of ground to be covered, obviously with the background of these aliens. But I do feel that we deserve some tidbits, some insight. They don't have to focus the entire third film on where they come from, but at this point, we've seen enough of them to wonder more about them. And it can't weigh the film down, I don't think. Not at this point. But as far as this movie goes, A Quiet Place 2, I thought it was amazing. I would give it every thumbs up that I have. I only had 2, so I can only do 2. But yes, see it. You will not be disappointed.